I'm Julie Barkey with this Senate update. It's the time of year where lawmakers roll up their sleeves and prepare for long hours in conference committees. Many of them have already begun their side-by-side comparisons with the House, and this year many of the bills are significantly different, particularly with budget targets. We spoke with the chairs of the Senate Tax, Transportation and Public Safety, and E12 Finance Committees. We begin with Senator Skoe and the tax provisions he says he will fight hard to keep in the final bill. Briefly describe some of the key priorities in the Senate bill that going into this process you're going to fight hard for.
Well, we think the Senate has a well-balanced bill that does a number of things. First of all, it invests in Minnesotans. Particularly pleased with the work the committee did with regard to veterans job credit. $2,500 credit for a company, a nonprofit would be a grant that would hire a veteran. There's 10,000 unemployed veterans in Minnesota. There's a lot of conversation about housing, mental health, other issues as these folks try to bring normalcy back to their lives. We think the most important thing is to help them get a job. And so we're really pleased with that investment. We also are happy with the workforce housing article that we have in the Senate tax bill. We recognize that there are jobs in many communities in rural Minnesota. People are struggling to find housing close to those jobs. Pretty significant provision that should help address that.
Senator, you've mentioned to us in the past that you and Chair Greg Davids have a pretty good working relationship. Have you identified early some areas of compromise?
Well, in the Twitter world, there is some conversation about the distance between Representative Davids and I. He's from southern Minnesota, I'm from northern Minnesota, so despite the geographic distance, I think we're going to find some common ground. Representative Davids is going to appreciate some of the investments we make. We're going to contemplate some of the tax reductions that he's proposing. I'm not prepared today to comment on specific ones, but overall we think some tax relief is good. The Senate proposal prefers property tax relief. We'll see how the House feels about that as we get on into conference.
How deep can you go in these discussions without budget targets at this point?
Well, we're going to start today. We'll do sames and similars. Tomorrow we're putting together a list of areas that the Senate has in our bill that the House does not. Some of them will touch on money, but they are areas that we want the House to have a full understanding of the issue. So as we do get targets, those decisions can be made quicker.
Again, that was Senate Tax Chair Skoe, and up next we have Senator Scott Dibble and the transportation finance package that is so different from the House. Many question whether a final bill is even possible.
Well, the House bill literally eliminates our ability to build transitways in the metropolitan area and even goes further and cuts basic bus service by 25% over the next few years. So our ability to really respond to a growing population need in the metropolitan area is totally inadequate in the House bill, and it's very disappointing. But we're going to have some conversation. We start our conference committee today, and we'll find out what exactly they're thinking by doing this. I suspect it's a position of leverage that they're trying to get consideration in other parts of the bill for.
Are there any provisions that you're going to go in there? Really, obviously you fight hard for the Senate position overall, but what do you need to have to pass a bill?
Well, it's really about a set of principles. We need to make sure that we're investing for a growing economy and a growing population with resources that are reliable and sustainable and dedicated, that are sufficient to not just maintain what we have, but to make sure that we're positioned to compete on a national and international stage. We need to make sure that we're treating all parts of the states equally, so that we're responding to metro needs, both in roads and transit, and greater Minnesota needs in terms of roads and greater Minnesota transit. It needs to be balanced and comprehensive and sustainable and future-oriented.
Am I hearing that you need a gas tax to actually have a bill to pass this year, or is it something you're willing to walk away from and just have a bare bones bill and then send this to the voters in a couple of years as the next election issue?
Well, you raise a good point. We're not going to pass a bill that is just kind of half-baked, that doesn't really set us up for the next generation of transportation investments. The reason for that is because if we only do a small bill, we won't be able to come back to this transportation investment discussion for another 5, 10, even 20 years it's taken in the past to get the kind of synergy and energy and momentum to have a large transportation debate that occupies the attention and the political capital of all 201 legislators and the governor. We do a little bill, and then everyone says, we did that a few years ago, we don't need to do that again. We know what the need, what the opportunity, and the challenge is. So the short answer to your question is yes. We don't get a substantial and adequate bill, we'll drop it and come back again in another couple of years.
Finally, have there been any, I know you haven't started your conference committee at this point when we're talking with you, when we're taping this, but early on, have you seen some areas, identified areas of compromise where you can come in and have some resolution?
You know, the two bills are so different from each other that it's hard to see where we could actually come to some middle ground. We're going to have to really figure out a third path or figure out this path of yours is great and this path of ours in this other area is great. That's compromise. But in terms of like merging or blending the bills, it's pretty hard to do at this point. They take existing general fund resources that we use for education, healthcare, put those into transportation. We know those will go away as soon as there's any sort of competition for general fund resources. They take dedicated sources in driver services and vehicle services funds and shift those into purposes for which they're not intended, and they completely gut transit. So hard to know how we could reconcile those dramatically, radically different approaches. I will say, though, that in terms of the overall size of at least the road and bridge need, we agree on their general numbers, so that's a positive sign.
Finally, we caught up with Senator Charles Wiger. He delves into the education funding bill. It includes pre-kindergarten, which is absent from the House provision.
The Senate bill invests nearly $80 million in early education. High priority that students be ready for kindergarten. If a student's ready for kindergarten, they're very likely to graduate and to be college and career ready. A specific proposal that we put a large priority on for this provision would be school readiness. $65 million would go into a program which was actually started almost 24 years ago, but would beef up the opportunity for 4-year-olds. And it would not mandate that school districts provide this program, but it would be optional. And all 4-year-olds in Minnesota would have the opportunity to participate part-time in a high-quality program through area school districts or charter schools. If a school district wanted, they could work with community organizations and others to provide this, as they're doing now in some cases if there's space or other issues.
Senator, you're early in the conference committee process right here, but has there been some insight on areas of compromise thus far?
It's too early yet to talk about the areas of compromise, but I'm sure we will get there. I'd like to point out a couple of other key differences between the bills. We have a larger emphasis first on the early education, but we also have a dramatically higher figure for the basic formula. And of course, we want to see that figure get even higher as we await what the budget targets will be from the Governor, Speaker Dowd, and Majority Leader Bach. So the Senate bill is substantially higher for the formula. In addition to that, for formula and also for early education, we invest in school facilities. There's a great inequity right now in the state for the funding of school buildings for repairs, capital needs, and we leveled the playing field in a provision which was put together in a bipartisan way in 2013. There's no money in the House bill to do that, nor in the governor's bill, but we're very proud of the provision that we've done on school facilities. Another area where there's nothing in the House bill is for QComp. We put in about $20 million so that all school districts would be eligible by lifting the cap on this program, which focuses on teacher training, development, and performance. It was the brainchild, actually, of Governor Pawlenty, and as it's rolled out over the years, many districts have come to appreciate the value. We have about half of the students in the states now participating in programs with QComp, and we want to make it available to all school districts. So that's a key difference as well, to have QComp.
And it's obviously your job to go in and fight for the Senate position while you're in conference committee.
Yes.
What are the provisions that you have to pass an education bill?
It's very important to increase the formula. And at the end of the day, the basic formula will increase. It's important as well that we continue the investment in early education. I would expect that you'll see a mix in the final bill regarding early education opportunities in readiness, in scholarship, and some of the other areas that we've identified for readiness programs. For example, the Reading Corps provides early literacy programs. Chance to Grow is another initiative, and we've targeted different programs in early ed. So it's a must that we continue that investment, and that's going to depend on what that target amount is. Facilities is very, very important as well, so that we have a level playing field.
Okay, and as we mentioned earlier, it is early in this conference committee process. Are you optimistic?
Yes, I am.